The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to our webinar. This is Sector 101, Essential Elements of Sector Practice. My name is Jim Torrens. I'm with the National Network of Sector Partners, an initiative of the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. I'm happy to join you actually from the offices of the California Endowment, who have made space for us because our own building is having fire drills this morning. So we're coming to you from TCE. I am very excited about the webinar series we're putting together. I'm also excited about the chance to work with you. I myself am a former LA County resident. I grew up in Santa Monica, although I now root for the Giants, I have to admit. And I'm also a former employee of JVS in San Francisco, so I'm looking forward to talking with the JVS folks in Los Angeles, as with all of you. I'm going to unmute your computers and phone lines. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to work on that in a moment. Actually, would you mind unmuting if you go to attendee list? We're going to unmute everybody so that we can all speak to one another. We really intend for this session to be an interactive session and discussion, and we're a small enough group that we're able to have it be a little bit more free-form than some other webinars you may have attended. We're looking forward to that. So I've introduced myself. I want to introduce our panelists. I'll start just by introducing Jack Mills, who's my colleague at NNSP in the Insight Center, and who's actually joining us from Boston. Jack, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
Good to meet everybody over the webinar. As Jim said, I direct the National Network of Sector Partners. We're an initiative of the Insight.
Muted.
Uh-oh. Jack, I think I cut you off.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Sorry, we're back. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to introduce you actually, Jack, as the director of NNSP and an important player in building policy support for sector initiatives, both at the state and federal level, and also someone who's been involved particularly in building funding support through work with funder collaboratives like the LA Workforce Funder Collaborative. Do you want to say a few more words? And we promise not to mute you this time.
Thank you, Jim. Well, let me go on maybe to say a little bit about National Network of Sector Partners. And some of the webinar participants, you may be familiar with our organization, but just to give a headline for those who are not, we're a nationwide membership organization. Our members are sector initiatives themselves and supporters of the sector approach. We were formed in 1999. You may have heard me say earlier that we're an initiative of the Insight Center for Community Economic Development. Just to give some flavor, we have 450 members. Most of them are in healthcare and manufacturing. Among the sector initiatives in our membership, we have 18 industry sectors in all. The organization itself is dedicated to the sector approach and promoting it and increasing it. We work in partnership with our members, with local community members. We really value your knowledge on the design and implementation and improvement of sector initiatives. It's where we get a lot of our best information. In terms of the policy work Jim mentioned, we worked with National Governors Association, just as one example. In the course of that project, about 26 states that were involved improved their state policy to support sector initiatives at the regional level. Jim, let me stop there. Hopefully that's a little bit of a thumbnail on NNSP.
Okay, and you know, those of you who are interested in learning more about what NNSP does and how you can participate, I think many of you have already signed up to receive updates from us through the webinar registration process if you weren't already NNSP members or receiving information. I do want to introduce now Dazzy McKelvey, who is a principal of Workforce Matters based in Austin, Texas. That's her consulting group for workforce development. And we're thrilled to have Dazzy with us. She's got more than 25 years in workforce development. She's a longtime champion of sector initiatives and sector-focused approaches to helping people get good jobs. Before starting her consultancy, Workforce Matters, Dazzy was the Deputy Executive Director and a founding staff member, I think the founding staff member, is that right? of Capital Idea with Steve Jacobs, which is, if you're not familiar, it's a nationally recognized nonprofit and model of sector initiatives around the country. And among many other things that she did at Capital Idea, she helped Capital Idea grow from an organization that served 60 people a year in its first year to one that serves over 700 a year now. And it's also been replicated, an effort that she led in Houston. So, Dazzy, does that start to get at what you've done, and what are you doing now? Oh, Dazzy, are you there? I'm not sure why we can't hear you. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Again, first let me apologize for my voice. I am slowly, very slowly recovering from laryngitis, but I am thrilled to be able to be with you today. And Jim, you covered just about everything about me. What I'd like to add, though, is what I'm going to share with you today is what I've learned on the ground from startup when we didn't have paper, pencil, paper, anything at Capital Idea. A leading workforce intermediary to where it is now, a nationally recognized workforce development program. And I was very fortunate to have that opportunity to learn on the ground. And today you'll hear the good, the bad, the ugly about how we managed, the mistakes we made, and the things we did right. After 12 years with Capital Idea, I did start my own firm, Workforce Matters, specializing in workforce development strategies, program design and implementation, partnership growth and advancement, and I'm having fun doing it. So I look forward to our further conversations.
Great, thank
Jim.
you. And we're so thrilled that you're feeling better, even if that laryngitis does not want to let go. I'd like to take this opportunity because we do envision this as a conversation amongst all of us here who hear a little bit about you, our participants. And in particular, what I'd like to do is just give you a chance to say your name, the organization that you're with. If it has an acronym, maybe you can say what the acronym stands for. And pretty much we'll keep it at that. But it'll give us a chance to hear your voice. It's something that we hope we'll hear throughout the session. So you should see a slide that has a list of those who had registered as of a certain point yesterday. We may have others on the line, and that would be great. But maybe we can start at the top with the folks from CRCD. Are you there? Hello?
Yeah.
Well, why don't we move down the list? Anyone can volunteer just to say that you're present and eager to participate. I know we're not all muted now because I unmuted you.
Do you want me to go first, Jim?
Thank you. It's always important to break the ice.
No problem. This is Steve Decker, Executive Director of the Home Care Workers Training Center. We are a California statewide charity focused on long-term care workers.
Thank you so much, Steve. That's great, and glad to have you with us. Who else will announce their presence?
Hi, this is Lori Cordoglium, calling from Verdugo Workforce Investment Board in Glendale. We are focusing on healthcare IT, workforce development.
Thank you so much, Lori. Glad to have you with us.
Hi, this is Pat E. from Vital Research. We're an evaluation research firm, and we're the external evaluator for the LAWFC.
Okay, Pat, thank you for being on the webinar.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I know some folks may not be able to speak because maybe you don't have a mic on your computer. If you prefer to phone in, it also helps. It may help with your audio so that you can hear more clearly. But let's hear from at least a few more folks.
This is Robert Mejia, manager of the South Bay Workforce Investment. We're focusing on training for home energy retrofit occupations.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Let's see. Would anyone else care to let us hear your voice? Well, this is a list of some of those who have joined, and we really want to be able to hear from you all over the course of the session. So please do chime in. We want to ask questions, but we want to hear from your experience and your expertise. And we'll move along now. So I want to introduce one other member of our panel, and basically our host, Justina Munoz of the United Way of Greater Los Angeles. And obviously you're familiar with Justina, I'm sure, and she coordinates the LA Workforce Funder Collaborative. We're doing these webinars through her good graces. So Justina, would you like to say a few words of welcome and talk about why you wanted to do these webinars and work with us and your grantees? Justina, are you there? You may have to unmute your phone or your.
I'm trying. Okay. Me too. Oh yeah, I did.
Okay. Well, we can hear some of you, but we can't hear Justina. Justina? Okay. Well, we will work on trying to give you a chance to talk to our group. I'm not sure why it's not working, but let's just say that we're grateful to have the chance to do this through the Funder Collaborative, and NNSB, as some of you may know, has played a supporting role for funding collaboratives around the state of California and the country, and has done some work with the Funder Collaborative in the past. We're excited about the chance to work with you all. One of the first pieces of that work was a survey that you all took about topics of interest and need, and things that sort of the areas in which you felt that you had most capacity, and the areas that you felt that your initiatives could could be strengthened. And so I've sent you the results. I don't want to spend our whole time going through them, but I do want to just highlight a few things. First, this is the result of the first section of the surveys, which had to do with the several statements about, different important areas of sector practice: providing services to workers, knowledge of your industry sector, deep knowledge of your industry sector, ability to form and maintain effective partnerships, ability to evaluate your efforts and continuously improve, sustainability of your initiatives, services for employers, ability to make lasting change in employer practices, policies, and workforce and educational systems, and involvement of employers in your initiatives. And if you notice, virtually every initiative felt very strong in the ability to provide high-quality services for workers, which is really wonderful. And there are many testimonials about different ways and innovative ways that you all are meeting the many and varied needs of the people you are trying to help find jobs and improve their employment prospects. Similarly, you felt pretty good about your knowledge of the industry sectors in which you're working. As we move to the right, services for employers and systems change and employer involvement, you'll see that those are some of the areas that you felt you could use more help with. And particularly involving employers in your initiative was a key area where you thought that there could be some benefits to improving your practice. So I want to take a moment here to ask our panelists, Jack and Dazzy, in your experience, does this seem consistent with where sector initiatives are, you think, and around the country, and the kinds of things that they're both good at and sometimes struggle with?
Well, this is Jack, and I think two things I'd note: the interest in doing more on systems change, and the interest in paying more attention to employer involvement. Those are very much consistent with what I see across the country.
Dazzy, what's your thought? Is this similar to where you feel folks are coming from in your experience, and maybe what you found more or less challenging at Capital Idea?
This is totally consistent with what we found. Keeping employers engaged is very, very important to the overall initiative. And systems change is long-term, and you have to keep the eye on that ball. And so often people want immediate gratification, so systems change was also something. And the other one, though, that was key for Capital Idea was sustainability, and how we looked at sustainability, and it being about more than getting more money in the coffers. So this is very consistent with where Capital Idea is in Austin, Texas.
Well, thanks. And in fact, we will focus on those two areas, particularly the employer involvement and the sustainability angle, with you today. And then as we put together additional webinars down the road, and I'll share a little more information about that in a moment, we're going to focus on those two topics as well, give them separate webinars of their own. I do want to try back with Justina Munoz, if we're able to hear you now. I'm not sure what happened before, but I think we might be able to get you to say a few words now. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank
Can
goodness.
you hear me? Okay. Yes. Just before I take up only a few more moments, we might be having some difficulty, so I just wanted to recheck. We have many of our callers on the line, and one of the interesting things I did is on the audio mode, if you dialed in like myself, make sure your radio button is set to use the telephone, because if it's still set on the speaker or standby, that's maybe my problem of why you didn't hear me earlier. So if you can just recheck that in your audio mode, okay? Otherwise, welcome, welcome, and I am hoping that everyone can hear me. I just wanted to touch base a little bit about the background of where we are. Most of you have been with us for at least 2 years now, and some are coming on as new partnerships in development of becoming, hopefully, fully engaged workforce partnerships. And as you know, as we're working on our dual approach under our workforce partnership model, which is basically a full engagement of training opportunities, building pipelines, and employer engagement. As we mentioned that we've been doing this evaluation of all of our partners, we have identified a few areas of opportunity that we can provide some additional capacity resource building. So that's kind of the initial background of why we feel, as far as the Funders Collaborative, is why we want to continue to invest not just in our programs to provide that training pipeline to employment, but also build a well-rounded program that leads you to sufficiency and sustainability of your program. So that's kind of like in a nutshell where we are, and I do appreciate the opportunity that you have completed the evaluations, the reporting, and a lot of that information behind the scenes have been taken to bring some common areas amongst our partners to actually that we can find opportunities again to enhance your programs. We do ask that these programs, for those who are receiving funding, that you do require to participate as an opportunity for, how do you want to say, building your programs, relationships, and developing your programs, definitely. I'm glad that we have a full house today, so I'm hoping, again, everyone can hear us. I do want to let you know that this is these are series of workshops. So there are actually, I believe, 4. So I'm just going to take a moment, and hopefully you all have something to write with. And I believe we sent these to you in the past, but we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to give you the dates, not so much the topics, and then we'll follow up with another information flyer in regards to upcoming workshops. So today, of course, is the March 17th. Our next one that we're going to have held is going to be April the 7th, and we're keeping the same time, 10 to 11:30, and that's also a Thursday. And then we're going to have another one on Thursday, April the 28th. We are looking for, I believe, one more date, I believe, because we, again, had initially planned to start in February. So if that's the case, I just wanted to keep you as close as possible to marking these on your calendar, and we look to have at least one agency, every agency represented by at least one person. The more the merrier. So this is a good opportunity, definitely, that allows us to, one, network, learn from everybody's shared experience, and so forth. So again, based on the collaborative initiatives, we are using a sector approach. Each of you are growing your opportunities and becoming fully engaged workforce intermediaries. And so this is an opportunity to kind of tie those, some of those things that you do very well, some of those things that are still new to you, and developing your resources around. So in a nutshell, that's all I have to say. So I just want to give the rest of the time dedicated to the first webinar we have. And again, this is a series, so please definitely mark your calendars. And if you have questions or concerns, please direct them to me after the webinar and or by email. Okay? So enjoy, and please ask a lot of questions. Thanks. Okay, so back to you, Jim.
Okay, thanks. So you may see that, and I really am sorry for the technical difficulties we've been having, but hopefully they're getting resolved. You may see a message that I sent that reiterates what Justine was suggesting, which is that if you are using your computer for audio and that's not working well, you may try using your telephone and calling in. If you did call in, you'll need to have entered or to enter your audio PIN, and that'll be in the audio panel of your window, and also to select use telephone instead of use mic and speakers. Hopefully, if you want to be heard, you'll be able to be heard. If you can't, there is a questions panel in which you can type questions, and I did receive several folks saying, yes, I'm on the phone. I'm here. So you know, Alma Salazar at LA Chamber, and Juan Alvarado, and Eric Cerrato, and Ben Espetia. Thank you for being on, and you know, I'm sorry that this was some difficulty. Madeline Brand and JVSLA as well. So we're going to move on, and I will, if there are remaining technical challenges, I will try to address them as we get further in, and particularly give some of our panelists a chance to talk, and I'll then try to engage with you about any remaining technical difficulties. These are some topics that also came up in the survey, and I just want to say, you know, we have combined this with the areas in which folks said they had some need to come up with the series of webinars that Justina was mentioning. The next one is on April 7th, but then after that we have 2 others. And why don't I stop for a moment and see if you have questions for Justina about the webinar series, questions about the survey and its findings, which I sent to you, or questions for us about the webinars in general. What questions or comments would you like to make at this time?
Can someone speak to make sure that we're all back online? Or answer yes if you can hear us. Anybody?
I can hear you.
Hi. Okay. All right. So again, just as this, Justina, once again, just as we're continuing the series, again, we did take the survey, we have the results, which kind of concluded to our initial findings from our evaluation and reports, and basically in some topic areas. And I thought just because we have some new and some more mature type participant projects working with us right now, we thought we'd just take one moment to kind of go back, do a little bit of assessment results, and start with making sure we're all on the same page, same concept, same language in regards to sector initiatives. So that's the purpose in kind of like first 101. Okay. So Jim, just kind of back to you on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Unless there are further questions, we'll move on. So this is the date of the next webinar, and you'll get an invitation to that along with materials from this session. We're pleased to have the Director of Programs from JVS in San Francisco, which has developed a very innovative employer engagement model and administers a healthcare sector academy in San Francisco. So as one of our panelists, we'll be talking with them, and if you don't have it saved on your calendars already, please do save the date. So I guess it would have been helpful to have the control panel a little earlier. We'll just skip through it, but in case you're not sure where the audio panel is, that's where your controls are, and hopefully you can mute and unmute there. I understand some of you are still having difficulty. You can click on this little button to hide that panel so that it'll be out of your way. So it'll shrink down, and then you can bring it back that way. And you know, we are recording this session, so we'll send a recording after the fact. There's your audio panel. And if you're having difficulty, you may look at the audio setup. as Justina mentioned, using the telephone, you may have to select use telephone to change between using a phone and using your microphone and speakers. Once again, I will follow up with folks to see if there's any other help I can be while we speak. I mentioned that you can raise your hand and submit questions. I see that some of you have done that already, and I will respond to those. The session, as I mentioned, is being recorded, and we'll send the slideshow and also the recording out after the session. You'll get an email that looks just about like this. Okay, so I wanted to provide a brief framework for us to talk about and think about before we hear from Dazzy. And I will be quite brief, both because I think you all know a fair bit about sector initiatives in general, but also because I think the real meat will be to hear about how these concepts apply. But just to make sure we're all on the same page and we have a shared understanding of what a sector initiative is, and we can use the same language to describe it, I did want to make a few points. At NNSP, we think of sector initiatives as especially being regional in nature, because economies in their labor markets are regional and don't conform necessarily to geographic boundaries. That's essentially the frame of either government or funding allocations, but it's not business's frame of operation. So we do think of sector initiatives as being regional and operating within regional labor markets. They are industry focused in the sense that they really require a deep knowledge of particular industries, as well as connections with multiple employers within those industries. And I do want to stress the idea that partnering with multiple employers and aggregating needs across employers in an industry is really an essential feature of sector initiatives, and kind of the next step beyond strong sort of bilateral partnerships with specific employers. Many of us in workforce development practice, and I'm speaking from my own past experience, were able to set up strong relationships with particular employers that were really beneficial both to them and to our participants. Going beyond that to gather or convene groups of employers to understand their collective needs and what needs they have in common, and find solutions that really affect an industry within the region. Multiple employers is kind of the next step that one of the steps that distinguishes sector approach from traditional workforce development. There is a key role within sector initiatives known as a workforce intermediary or sector intermediary, and we'll take a look at a visual depiction of that in a moment. But really, that is the central role for pulling together both an understanding of the industry's needs and the needs of particular employers within industry, as well as an understanding of the available workforce and the folks that are trying to help connect with jobs in that industry, and educational and support resources that are available to create complete programs that will support people in getting into those jobs, as well as the ability to pull together funding to support that work. So it's a really it's a demanding role because it requires an organization to be able to function in multiple spheres at once and to develop expertise in several really quite different types of activity. But when successfully done and involving pulling together partnerships, it's what makes sector initiatives powerful. And of course, central to this is the idea that there are two customers, both the target industry and employers within the industry and workers. You can't serve the one without serving the other. It's kind of an underlying principle, and solutions have to be win-win. And then the last thing I would say is that systems change is another way in which sector initiatives go beyond simply serving the needs of some workers or helping employers fill some positions. And it's kind of we'd say it's a new way of doing business. So I just encapsulated much of that here. This is how sector initiatives may be different from traditional job matching and training services. The focus on being problem-oriented and identifying specific issues that workers and industry are facing is really central. And I think the rest I've already covered. Often the problem orientation it leads to identifying systemic barriers, ways in which the existing workforce system is not working, or ways in which employer practices are maybe screening out unnecessarily workers that could benefit the employers and folks that could get good jobs in the industry. So sometimes looking deeply at what are structural problems within a labor market is a way of then pointing where systems change is needed. I mentioned a sort of visual representation of what a sector initiative can look like, and you'll see the workforce intermediary there as a kind of hub coordinating many different types of resources. I'm sure at times this can feel like it's pulling you in 5 or 7 or 20 different directions at once, and I'm sorry to say that that's essential to the role, but it's also what makes sector initiatives powerful. And you'll see some of the different types of activities that the workforce intermediary connects. One thing that's important to note is that it's not necessary for the intermediary to be providing all of these services. And I would go a step further to say it's not desirable generally, because it's very hard to be an expert in all things. But the ability to pull together partnerships where partners can fill some of the niches and contribute to their resources to these different aspects of the work, is a key to the success of a workforce intermediary. And I'm sure Dazzy can talk about that a little bit. Jack, I think we already heard a little bit about the impact of sector initiatives. If you have anything in particular that you want to add to what I've said, I'd ask you to do that. Also ask Dazzy if there is anything that you'd like to add. But Jack, why don't you go ahead first?
Well, Jim, I don't want to take too much time, but just a couple of thoughts. One is that what we're seeing these days is that sector initiatives have impact in 3 areas. One of them is to improve the quality of jobs. And if folks have the questions about how we're seeing that happen, I can answer those later. A second thing, of sector initiatives that are assisting employers to create jobs, and there are a variety of strategies that they're using. Of course, the most of the sector initiatives are increasing access to employment and career paths that provide economic security. And so just a couple of data points on that. Random sample evaluation done of 3 mature sector initiatives can sort of say, what any sector initiative can shoot for. They compared a group of people who really had significant barriers to employment with another group that had similar barriers to employment but did not participate in the sector initiative. That other group could do anything they wanted. Over the course of 2 years, the group that participated in the sector initiatives had 18% higher earnings. Looking at the second year, and that's really when the training that the sector initiatives provided was finished and people were at work, it was really pretty significant, 29% higher earnings. Just maybe one other data point. In Pennsylvania, the state's really invested a lot in sector initiatives. They did a survey of employers last year. 84% of their employers, and that's about 5,000, reported significant increases in productivity. So, you know, it really shows that there can be both significant benefits to program participants and to employers. There's a lot more that can be said about impact of sector initiatives, but let me hold the rest of it for if there are any questions on that.
Just to add to that, this is Dazzy. I totally agree with what you pointed out, and I do want to, with Capital Idea, the city of Austin did a research piece on the impact of the workforce development programs that they were funding here in the city of Austin. It looked at shorter-term programs. It looked at programs that were longer-term, like Capital Idea, but not one that was a intermediary like Capital Idea. And I'd be happy to share those results with you. It's very, very impressive, the difference in wages earned by participants that graduated from Capital Idea and another group that they tracked along the same period. Just as impressive as what you mentioned, Jack. So I'd be happy to provide that after the end of the webinar.
Dazzy, that would be great. This is Jim, and if you send it to me, I will include it in the materials that I send after the session. And Jack, okay. I'll also include a link to the random assignment study that you mentioned, and to any other materials you think would be relevant for our group.
There's a report with the Pennsylvania findings, and so that might be another link, and it both has the employer findings that I mentioned and also great findings about benefit to workers.
Great. Unless we have some questions from the audience, we'll move on. But I do want to give a chance for folks to engage with what's been said already. So questions or comments about the sector framework or the impact that sector initiatives you see are having nationwide? Okay, we'll move on. And you know, I did get some questions before the session. Thank you for submitting them in the registration process. You know, this is one that came up, and the question had to do with what sectors are ripe for sector initiatives. And if you'll, I'll just share something briefly, and maybe we can talk about other ways of answering this question. I think you could take it several ways, but NNSP does a survey every couple of years of sector initiatives around the country. We call it Sector Snapshot, and I think Jack may have referenced it earlier. One of the areas we ask people is what industries they focus on, and just as a look, you can see that there are, there look like there may be 20 different industries here. So I think the short answer is that there is no one set of industries that are good for sector initiatives while others are not. The longer answer is that the industry that is right for involvement is probably the result of a process in planning and research in your regional labor market, considering the employers in that area, what the economy is, and what the available workforce is. I don't think we have time to spend more time on it, but I did want to say I think it's a great question, and maybe as we talk about employer involvement, we can look at it some more. That said, it's really time, it's past time, honestly, for us to give Dazzy a chance to talk a little bit about Capital IDEA and what she did there and what made Capital IDEA so successful and continues to make it so successful. So, Dazzy, why don't I turn it over to you, and you can
thank you.
Start a little bit by just telling us. Go ahead.
Okay, first off, let me talk quickly about Capital IDEA. It's a model for helping adults acquire a post-secondary education that I was lucky enough to learn how to do from the ground up. If you can go, Capital IDEA's mission, if you can go to the next slide, is to sponsor educational services that lead to financial stability for its participants. It does work in 3 primary sectors right now: medical, technical, and professional trade. Their goals are graduation or industry-recognized certification, employment, self-sufficiency, giving back, and breaking the cycle of poverty. You can go to the next slide. Capital IDEA participants, as the slide shows, is typical of what you would expect. Majority minority and majority women. No matter what educational level they might have, their reading and math levels are at average at 7th grade when they come into the program. Now, Capital IDEA is a long-term training program. It takes about 3.5 years for the participants from entry into Capital IDEA to graduation with an associate's degree or certification and into employment. Now, Capital IDEA follows these participants up to 2 years after they graduate and are into employment. Next slide, please. Capital IDEA uses the methods listed to accomplish their goals. It is a multifaceted approach that needs focused attention on each component. If you can go to the next slide that we talked about earlier, this shows visually what Capital IDEA does. If you look at that center circle right there, instead of saying workforce intermediary, it would say Capital IDEA. And there are several different partners that we partner with, and I'll talk about those briefly. First and foremost, Capital IDEA partners with leaders in the community like Austin Interfaith, which is a coalition, churches, schools, congregations, and unions that advocate for and creates the political will to fund Capital IDEA so that they can get people in their community, job seekers and workers in their community, from the right side of this visual to the left side into employment. They partner with employers and businesses in the community to identify sectors, and not just to identify sectors, but identify strategies around those sectors. Also, what training requirements and curriculum for those sectors. They also provide internships, coaching for our participants, and even hiring our graduates. And we can talk a little bit later about how we bring these partners in and some of the strategies we use to get employers to want to do this. The other sector is partnering with training providers or educational institutions. Capital IDEA mostly works with the community college here in Austin, and we have worked with them to redesign classes, redesign curriculum when classes are offered, especially around some of the remedial or developmental classes, which are the gatekeeper for keeping job seekers and workers from getting those college-level classes or that training that will lead to those jobs that pay a living wage with a career path and with benefits. We work with workforce investment boards to co-enroll. That allows us to leverage funds, and it's a win-win. Capital IDEA will fund them up to a certain point, and then we work with the workforce investment board to fund them from that point forward, and we collaborate on who pays for what. We leverage funds from other community-based organizations and local and state government. We also have a work with banking business services out there. They provide financial literacy, financial planning. We also have a robust resource development program that engages individuals and foundations in-kind contributions. So there are a variety of different partners that it is absolutely essential, and some that I probably haven't even missed, but I will answer questions about them that lead to the success that Capital Ideal has had. Go to the next slide, please. Let's talk about some individual outcomes for Capital Ideal. They are impressive, as you can see on this slide. 87% year-to-year retention rate in college. 90% complete the College Prep Academy. Those are those developmental classes. 88% go on to meet the Texas State Initiative requirements. That's so that they can take those college-level classes. If you look at community colleges as a whole in Texas, it's 33% of people that are trying to get into college-level classes that complete these requirements. This has also led to some system changes within the community college here in Austin, where they are redesigning how they offer their remedial courses. 93% graduation from the nursing program, 98% one-year retention in employment. The average wage at employment, and this was 2009, was $18.66 per hour. If you can go to the next slide, please. Oh, I think it's questions. I think it's real important to understand that Capital Ideal is an intermediary. Jim mentioned before, we don't provide any of these services. Our core competency, Capital Ideal pays for all books, tuition, fees, and child care and supportive service like wraparound services like emergency assistance. Core competency is case management and career counseling, and then the intermediary components that bring all these partners to the table. And I'll stop there, Jim, if anyone has any questions.
Well, I certainly do, but I'd love to hear questions from folks. If you're not able to ask your questions directly, I would say, would you send us your questions through the questions pane in the control panel, and I can read them to Dazzy or read them aloud and get our folks to address them. You know, I'll kick things off just by asking you to talk a little bit about, again, about this framework and you mentioned in particular a wide range of support services, and I'm wondering how do those partnerships work? How did you set them up? How are you able to? What are some of the successful partnerships that allow you to provide those support services?
First off, Capital Ideal gets funding from the City of Austin, Travis County, in the amount of about $2 million a year that covers those types of services. But of course, we want to leverage services in the community. So I talked about co-enrolling with WIA. WIA also provides some of those services. So we got together with our local Workforce Investment Board and talked with them about how we could co-enroll. What services would Capital Ideal offer and when, which is really important, and when would the services that the Workforce Investment Board would offer and when that would happen. And we came out with a MOU where Capital Ideal would take them through probably the first couple of years, and then the last year the Workforce Investment Board would come in and provide maybe transportation or maybe child care, maybe books and tuition, whatever funding we had available. And so that's how we worked with them. We also worked with like Austin Energy here in Austin that provides utility assistance. And we went and talked with them and talked with them about what we were doing, what Capital Ideal was doing. And this also led to a new sector eventually, but they set aside $4,000 a quarter for our participants to get utility assistance, and then referred us to their general manager, where we talked about an emerging sector around public utility technicians and line workers, where we were able to get a regional sector strategy going in that area. So those are just a couple of the different factors around support services.
Thank you. I have a few other questions, and I want to. They came in by through the questions pane, so please do send those questions in. This one comes from Ben Estia of Goodwill Serving the People of Southern LA County, and his question is, what industry was the second sector initiative that I'm wondering achieved 29% labor increase of earnings in the second year? Did you present a statistic about increased earnings, or was that you, Jack?
That was Jack.
Do you remember
but
that?
With Ideal, it was healthcare industry, basically with the nursing.
So that's
this is Jack. I'll answer the question quickly, because that 29% comes from the work of the 3 sector initiatives that the random assignment study was on. In Wisconsin, Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership was involved in construction primarily. In Washington, D.C., in New York City, Perscolis was involved in IT. And then in Boston, JBS Boston was involved in healthcare.
So Ben, that was multiple sectors, and we will send that report so you can take a look and get some descriptions of each of those programs. That is, the most rigorous random assignment study of sector initiatives that is out there, and those results really are impressive, but not just in one industry. So I want to forward another question that we got, which was from Jessica Goodhart of Lane, and the question is, can you speak to challenges and successes you've had with job seekers who have been in the criminal justice system? So I don't know, Dazzy, have some of your participants been involved in the criminal justice system? And
yes.
How did you...
Though about 15% of Capital Ideal's population are, ex-offenders or were in the criminal justice system, and what we did with those participants during our recruitment process, that led us to investigate the professional trades a little bit more. It was the need of our job seekers that sent us to seek trades that would not be a barrier. And as most people know, that is in the construction trades of some kind. So we developed a sector with the union workers, the electrical, the plumbing and pipe fitters, the electrical, the cabinet makers, and like that. That wasn't a barrier, and got together with them to figure out what particular requirements, what the needs were, what the requirements were. And if it's on a commercial site here in Austin or in Central Texas area, criminal background is not a barrier. So during the recruitment process and the application process, that's where Capital Ideal has to sit down and have those frank conversations with people and let them know what occupations are available to them. So we developed some sectors in particular around those areas for men and for people that had a record, and were very successful in it. Now, right now, because of the downturn, they're not hiring as many, but that's the area that we developed for that population.
You know, if I could ask a follow-up question, Dazzy.
Yes.
Is there a way that employers themselves were involved in either giving you important information about which occupations criminal background would be a problem, or in looking at their own hiring practices and whether they're unnecessarily screening some people out?
All of that happened when we were sitting down at the table with these different construction-related careers. We brought them all together. We convened several meetings and had these conversations, and that's where we found out we will take this, but we won't take this. And actually during those conversations, because there was such a need for skilled workers, some of the employers around the table changed or lessened their requirements because they needed good people. So they changed or made modifications in order to meet their employment needs. So that happened as a process of having other employers around the table that would say we don't care if it was a major felony, if they served their time and blah, blah, you know, and they have these skills. We'll just put them on a commercial site instead of a residential site. And some other employers said, well, okay, well, we can do that too. So that happened more with conversations around employers when they have a great need.
Well, it's so fascinating to hear about the role that having employers in the same room can have in changing employer practice. I think that's an important and very interesting aspect of what you just said. That if they see that others may be hiring ex-offenders and in fact gaining some kind of benefit by having access to more workers in that way, I think that could be pretty compelling. So it
has been in that particular situation.
So I do have a couple of other clarification questions. Another question from Ben Espetia, which is just clarifying, when you were talking about the nursing programs, which types of nursing programs you meant? Nurse assistant training, LVN or LPN training, beyond?
It is licensed here in Texas. It's licensed vocational nurses and associate degree nurses that are RNs. So it's those two areas. Capital Ideal trains for, well, it wants the average entry-level wage to be $16.90 an hour plus. And so we look at getting people to the level when they exit the program that they can step into that type of entry-level job.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Ben. I think so. Here's an interesting question. This comes from Lena Brooks, and her question is, what are some of the challenges that you've had working with your partners, and how did you solve them? And if I can help, I don't know if this is the right framing of it, but I had a related question about Capital Idea's partnership with the community colleges. And you mentioned ways in which that relationship, you helped community college change practices. That might or might not be a good example of challenges you've had working with partners and how you solved them. If it is, great. If not, any partnership that you've had that really went through an evolution and growth would be great.
Well, the community college very definitely is an example. Also, the Workforce Investment Board is an example. And early on, Capital Ideal made mistakes of, and I was part of that, we know how to do this better, just listen to us. And what we learned in the process is that it was very important to convene meetings and come up with a community vision to solve the problems, because each one of these entities are working in their own ways to solve a community problem. And so once we got to the point that Austin Community College didn't see Capital Ideal participants as Capital Ideal participants, but Austin Community College students, and once we continued to have conversations around the successes that they were having, and this is what we talk about sustainability of partnerships too, that the successes that Capital Ideal participants were having individually impacted overall the outcomes for Austin Community College. You know, they had greater success of graduates from their nursing program. They had greater success with people passing their state licensing exams. And so it was a learning process for Capital Ideal as an intermediary to not just read about it on a piece of paper and say, yes, it's about solving community problems. It really is about getting in there and figuring out what each partner needs to bring to the table, how that's going to look, formalizing that, and figuring out what the impact for the community is. And once that's done, of course, it's a little bit longer term, and you have to build trust around little small steps. But once that is done, then the rest of it is, I was going to say a piece of cake, but it's not. It's an ongoing process that has to happen. So it's very challenging to not let turf battles get in the way. And so another thing that Capital Ideal did to foster these partnerships is, as we were developing our strategic plan, it wasn't just a strategic plan for Capital Ideal. It was a strategic plan that included all of our partners. And so they became invested in the success of the plan. And I'll stop there because I can keep talking about different things.
But I want to ask you a question about that last bit, because I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
How did you involve all your partners in the strategic plan?
What we did is we wrote up a strategic plan for Capital Ideal, and we shopped it around. We shopped it around and said, you know, what does this look like? Does this make sense? You know, and we put in where, you know, some of the things. This took us after 3 or 4 years of being in, you know, from startup mode to, which was just survival, to really putting in an infrastructure that would last. And we put in what our partners have been doing for us as an example, but we wanted to expand on that, looking out, you know, 2 to 5 years. And we shopped it around, and people will, you know, they became invested, and they wanted to be a part of it. And they pushed us on some things that we were going to do and not do. And so, you know, and rethink like the partnerships and how that worked. And so we took a risk by actually giving them that document when it was still in draft form.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, I think that is really that's just fascinating. I think it's not the norm. It's clearly unusual, and sounds like it was very effective. And I think a couple of things I noticed were, first, that this framing of not your agenda but a community agenda also seems like a very inclusive way of getting at solving the problems. Solving community problems, I think, was how you put it.
right.
And then this idea that you were helping, in the example of the community college, you were helping the community college achieve its outcomes too. It seems both seems essential to the success of what you did. So I just wanted to flag those couple of things, because those seemed like they were salient points. I do want to move on to talk a little bit about the employer involvement at Capital Idea, just one of the topic areas. I see another question that we will be sure to have time for. Thanks for sending these questions in. Please keep sending them, and we will have time to get to those. Let's move forward just a little bit to ask you a little bit about. We'll go up to the slide that starts the section on employer involvement, and if you could just talk a little bit, Dazzy, about how employers are involved, have been involved at Capital Idea, and the different ways that they participated in the success of Capital Idea.
Okay. First off, we'll talk about the one that's near and dear to nonprofits, are that employers have funded Capital Idea. A variety of different methods of funding. Some is just direct donations. Others have funded us by providing placement fees. They have dollars set aside to recruit and employ people, and we talk with them about developing a model where, if Capital Idea sends them through and gets the certificate and they go to work for that employer, it will give us a placement fee of some kind. We also work with employers around hiring our graduates. And since we work with them on the front end, to develop this curriculum and identify the strategies, and we get their investment, they're there on the back end also. And so also opportunities open up for us when a graduate goes to work potentially for someone else. And we go in and talk with them. And we had employers that have modified their tuition reimbursement program to work with Capital Idea, because they figured out they got a better return on their investment if they use those dollars to work with incumbent workers that might be nurses' aides, for example, and they needed RNs. So funding around that. Also, employers have worked with us to be an advocate for public funds from the city, the county, and the state by going and testifying, by writing letters, by doing all of those things. Employers have been involved with Capital Idea and the community college when we were developing a new degree plan, for example, in power utility technician. Part of that is that we wanted an internship, because you know how that goes. You have the education, but you don't have the experience, and they want people with experience and education. So employers provided paid internships for people in this curriculum, and the community college gave them credit for that toward their associate's degree. So that's a way that they work with us. Of course, being part of advisory groups where they get together and work with us on identifying sectors and the changes in sectors and the new sectors. So those are a few of the ways that employers have worked with us. And another couple of ones. They have donated office space. For example, the space that Capital Idea is in right now, which is in the middle of downtown Austin. When we first got that space, Southern Union Gas was one of our employing partners. They gave us space that they could have gotten top dollar for that we still have today. And so that's another way that an employer, today we pay a little bit for it, but not near what other people do. Employers are also part of the Resource Development Committee, which, so those are just a few ways that employers are working with Capital Idea right now.
So I think that there are some different categories of ways in which they can be involved, but just in terms of program design and governance, it sounds like they're advising about not only which sectors you ought to be in, but within sectors, what the key occupations are, what the barriers to hiring might be, as with the ex-offenders, in lots of ways.
They do a lot of, for example, they even loan us some of their employees so that they can come over and do some of our assessment tests to see what kind of, characteristics or hand-eye coordination, those types of things would make someone successful in their chosen occupation. So very definitely, we don't take on any new careers. We don't change careers. We don't change curriculum with Austin Community College without the employer advisory group being a part of that process.
Wow, you mentioned the employees, the employers themselves participating in the assessment, and that was one of the successful practices that folks in that public-private venture study did. I know it's also something that Greg Irish, the head of the LA City WIB, speaks about as being important to the success of some of the programs funded through the LA City WIB. But it sounds like they're participating, in providing services as well as advising on the shape of those services.
Right, and they do things like come in and do mock interviews with our participants when they graduate. And so, not just providing internships and things like that, but actually putting some time into, spending on the participant side of things and not just the employer developing the sector side of things.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a few things that they do to support the program that I wanted to ask you to go into a little bit more detail about. One is this tuition reimbursement and the fact, the idea that employers have some funding which is set aside for training and that might be repurposed in a certain way to help support, not only their employees but your activities. How does that work?
Well, what we did is we went in and talked to at the beginning, just one skilled nursing center, and found out that they have a large variety of lower-level workers in those centers, but they wanted LVNs or LPNs and RNs or physical therapy technicians, and they had people in their that were employed by them that they knew were good employees but didn't have the skill set to move up. So we convened a meeting of a lot of these different employers, individual meetings first, and identified that all these different types of employers were having these same problems. And we brought them together. And one of the things that came out of that is that some of these people that were in lower-level jobs would take advantage of the tuition reimbursement that most employers have as part of their budget set aside, and they take one class here or one class there, but they never would get that industry-recognized certification and or a degree. So we talked with them about, hey, what about using that money in a different way? We talked about the results that Capital Ideal got and the return on investment and how, people actually did get to the program and get their certification. First, they invested that money with us. Someone in their employee wanted to advance into a living wage job that was career, with a career path and all of that. And then when those jobs opened up, they would hire some of our current participants in those positions so that they could get some hands-on experience while they were going to school. So it was a win-win-win. Win for our participants that needed kind of a part-time job while they were going to school. Win for the employers because they were upgrading the skills of some incumbent workers and getting a bigger return on their investment. And it was a win for Capital Ideal because a new sector, new partners, and new money. So it worked.
Well, you mentioned the phrase return on investment, and I wonder if you could comment briefly about, how you have evaluated return on investment of Capital Ideas efforts. Any criteria you used to evaluate return on investment? Sounds like in a certain sense you're making the case in the case you just described about the return on the employer's investment.
Right. But what we're looking at also when we talk about a return on investment Capital Ideal, we talk about it like a return on investment for the community as a whole, and that brings in all the partners. Even though and I don't have that information with me right now, we can figure out what the return on investment would be for employers. But the cost per participant per year for Capital Ideal is averages at $4,700 a year. And I know some people take a deep breath, oh, that's real expensive. It is, but remember, you're paying for books, tuition fees, child care, supportive services, and that career counselor piece. And here's what I tell people when they take that deep breath. I really wish I could have sent my sons to college for $4,700 a year, and he had no barriers to going to school. Then we look at the average time in the program, which is 3 years. The average salary before graduation is $14,000 a year. The average salary after graduation is $40,000 a year. The amount of increased taxes for Capital Ideal graduates will pay over a lifetime is $225,000. The amount of public assistance saved per graduate is $76,000 a year. The taxpayers are actually repaid if we were using all public monies. The taxpayers actually repaid in 3 years. That's the same thing we talk about when we're talking about private and individual funders. So the net return on investment is 575%. So we're talking about impact, and that's a big impact. And impact does equal sustainability. And so, and this is not as concrete yet, but we talk about Capital Ideal graduates having a generational impact on their families. Because if someone steps out being able, entry level, to make about $40,000 a year, it's not just the cycle of poverty is broken for the individual, it's broken for the entire family, and that impacts the next generation and is really crucial to the health of Central Texas. So those are some of the things we talk about impact. And I'll stop there in case someone has questions.
Well, it does.
Our one nugget of
so it does connect with a question that I had about sustainability, and you've already made the case that sustainability is about the impact you've had. It sounds like in certain ways the impact you've had for employers is a way to gain their sustained buy-in and even championing the program. I won't have time to go through in detail sort of the sustainability question for Capital Idea, but if there's a way for you to talk a little bit more about what strategies you implemented to sustain the program, and
okay. There are a couple. There's maybe 4, and this is in real broad strokes. Sustainability starts with organizational infrastructure. Okay, the first is leadership. It must be visionary, strategic, decisive, accountable, and most importantly, inclusive. The second strategic area is program management for sustainability, and you have to have metrics and demonstrated impact. The third, really broad, is transformation. You have to think of not doing more with less, but think of doing differently with less. And the fourth is technology. That's really, really important when you're talking about sustainability. That's in real broad strokes. The recommendations overall for this type of strategy is develop relationships at an individual level, convene learning meetings, ask questions and test conclusions, develop a strategic plan in collaboration, clarify and agree on cost measurements and progress metrics community-wide, develop and analyze financial and program data and share that with your partners, continuously improve program management, train on vision, mission, expected outcomes and impact, and craft and communicate your sustainability story based on your community impact. So that's in real broad strokes.
I know that sustainability is a topic that's of strong interest to everyone on the webinar. I want to assure you all that one of our sessions will be about sustainability and linking it with systems change. I think impact will be a key part of that. Just to reiterate what our next webinar will be, I think we're past time, so I think we're going to have to wrap up. But if you could just move forward until there are a couple of questions that were submitted in the registration process that we didn't get to. We will either work on sending you answers to these or incorporating them into the next webinars. So this was a really great question about how to deal with helping people find jobs during a time of high unemployment. So we'll definitely be talking about that. I would say employer involvement is one key, but that's too brief an answer. So we will address this question. I think there's another question about job creation that was submitted, and we are certainly going to have a section that includes both employer services and job creation. That will be the third of our sessions. So we will be addressing these topics. I will invite you after the session to give us feedback, and particularly, you can ask us additional questions, make comments about what will be helpful for future webinars, and just give us input on your experience of this webinar. I want to reiterate that I will be sending to everyone the recording of this session, the slideshow of this session, and supporting materials that came up during the session. So you will receive those today or tomorrow, along with a link to register for the next session. And really, Dazzy, just can't thank you enough for sharing your experience and your expertise. You just have we could have kept talking with you for another hour or so, I'm sure, but we're really grateful for your being with us today. Thank you.
You're very welcome, and I would be happy to answer any questions also after the webinar. You see my contact information, so thank you.
Jack Mills, thank you also, and Justina, thank you for hosting us. And to all of you who participated today, we really thank you. We hope this is useful to you. We're looking forward to the next sessions, and we appreciate your input on how we can make these sessions better in the future. So let's see if there's any last comment or question out there. I think we're done for today, and thanks again to everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week and have a great weekend.
Good day.